Knowledge, wisdom, history, evolution, gods, point of view, perspective.
Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. It helps people to become a better citizens, to get a better paid job, shows the difference between a good and bad. Education shows us the importance of hard work, and at the same time, it helps us to grow and develop. Thus, we are able to shape a better society to live in by knowing and respecting rights, laws, and regulations. Learning languages through educational processes helps interact with different people in order to exchange ideas, knowledge, good practices. It teaches us to live in harmony. The COVID-19 pandemic has created the largest disruptions of education systems in human history. Social distancing and restrictive movement policies have significantly disturbed traditional educational practices. The COVID-19 pandemic has provided us with an opportunity to pave the way for introducing digital learning. The lesson learning from the COVID-19 pandemic is that teachers and students or learners should be oriented on use of different online educational tools. After the COVID-19 pandemic, when the normal classes resume, teachers and learners should be encouraged to continue using such online tools to enhance teaching and learnings.
And we are here to discover the world of education.
What do you think is the importance of education in the Philippines? Proper and good education is very important for all of us. It facilitates quality of learning all through among people of any group, caste, region, and religion. It is a process of achieving knowledge, skills, values, beliefs, and moral habits.
The ancient Philippines, children were given the rudiments of education. Such education was both academic and spiritual. The father trained his sons to be warriors, hunters, fishermen, miners, lumbermen, and shipbuilders, while the mother on her part trained her daughter in cooking, gardening, serving, and other household duties.
It is said that in ancient Panay, a barangay school called Butuan operated under the supervision of a teacher who was usually an elderly man. Reading, writing, arithmetic, weapon use, and ubus were among the subjects taught to the student in barangay school. Every Filipino ancestor placed a high priority on education. Filipino can read, write, using their own local alphabet, Alibata, which is made up of 17 symbols that represent the alphabet's letter. There were vowels and 14 consonants among the 17 symbols.
The first education system for students in the country was established by virtue of Education Decree 1863. And furthermore, the decree required the government to provide school institutions for boys and girls in every town. As consequence, the Spanish schools started accepting Filipino students. It was during this time when the intellectual Filipino emerged. The normal school was also established, which gave men the opportunity to study a 3-year teacher education for the primary level.
During the Spanish period, the friars had complete authority over the educational system. They own a variety of schools, spanning from elementary to secondary education. The missionaries were in charge of educating, enforcing, and upholding rules and regulations that the students were subjected to. Starting in primary school and continuing to tertiary education, the missionaries focused Catholic religion. The students in primary school were taught Christian studies and ideas on how to read Spanish text with basic understanding in native language. In addition to Christian doctrine, students were taught Latin instead of Spanish.
The first schools for boys and girls were separated. The first established schools were exclusive for the boys. The Agustinians built the first school in the Philippines, situated in Cebu in 1565. College is equivalent to university during the Spanish regime. The students graduated with degree in Bachelors of Arts. The first schools for the boys was the Colegio de San Ignacio, which was built in Jesus in Manila in 1589.
Following the birth of the first school for women, Colegio de San Ildefonso opened in 1632. In religious congregation is also established a school for girls called Viterio. The so-called Viterio was meant for often the girls could not afford to educate themselves to subject to work, housekeeping, cooking, sewing, and embroidery, making, and others intend for a good housekeeping.
During the United States colonial period of the Philippines, 1898 to 1946, the United States government was in charge of providing education in the Philippines. Education became a very important issue for the United States colonial government since it allowed it to spread their values, particularly the English language, to the Filipino people. Instruction in English language and American history led to forming of a national identity and Filipino nationalism. Every child from age 7 was required to register in schools located in their own town or province. The students were given free school materials. There were 3 levels of education during the American period. The elementary level consisted of 4 primary years and 3 intermediate years. The secondary or high school level consisted of 4 years, and the third was college or tertiary level. Religion was a part of the curriculum of the school as it has been during the Spanish period.
In some cases, those students who excelled academically were sent to U.S. to continue their studies and to become experts in their desired fields or professions. They were called scholars and pensionados, because the government covered all the expenses. In return, they were to teach or work in the government offices when they finished their studies. Some examples of the successful Filipino scholars were Judge Jose Abad Santos, Francisco Benates, Dr. Honoria Sison, and Francisco Delgado.
Eventually, many elementary and secondary schools from Spanish era were recycled and new ones were opened in cities and provinces, among which were normal, vocational, agricultural, and business schools, wherein the most important colleges under the United States rule were Philippine Normal School in 1901, or Philippine Normal University today, and other normal schools throughout the country such as Silliman University in 1901, Central Philippine University in 1905, Negros Oriental High School in 1902, and St. Paul University Dumaguete 1904, and Cebu Normal University in 1915. Also university at present, Philemon Christian University in 1904, Iloilo Normal School in 1902, wherein the Western Visayas State University today, and Zamboanga Normal School at 1904, or the Western Mindanao State University today, National University in 1901, and University of Manila in 1914, and the Philippine Women's University in 1919, and Far Eastern University in 1933, and vocational school like Philippine Nautical School and Philippine School of Arts and Trades in 1901, wherein Technological University of the Philippines today, and the Central Luzon Agricultural School and the University of the Philippines was also founded in 1908.
Volunteer American soldiers became the first teachers of the Filipinos. Part of their mission was to build classrooms in every places where they were assigned. The American soldiers stopped teaching when only a group of teachers from US came to the Philippines in June 1901. They came aboard the ship Sheridan. August 1901, 600 teachers called Thomasites arrived. Their name derived from the ship they traveled on. The USS Thomas, the original batch of Thomasites, was composed by 365 males and 165 females. Did you know that the US government spent about $105,000 for expedition? More American teachers followed the Thomasites in 1902, making a total of about 1,074 stations in the Philippines.
American expeditionary forces were sent to Philippines with a mission to destroy the Spanish Armada in Manila Bay. It is part of their strategy to defeat the Spanish in the Spanish-American War raging at the time in Cuba.
The Act No. 74 established the public primary school in 1901 and intermediate school in 1904, which provides free public education. The Act No. 372 required all provinces to maintain a provincial high school. Did you know that Thomasites are the group of professionals sent by the United States government who were assigned to teach English languages? In 1901, Philippine Normal School was founded between teachers, while in 1908, University of the Philippines was established. American focus to train Filipinos in the democratic way of life, citizenship, moral character, and fundamentals of vocational education. Did you know that Thomasites are the group of professionals sent by the United States government who were assigned to teach English languages? In 1901, Philippine Normal School was founded between teachers, while in 1908, University of the Philippines was established. American focus to train Filipinos in the democratic way of life, citizenship, moral character, and fundamentals of vocational education. In 1901, Philippine Normal School was founded between teachers, while in 1908, University of the Philippines was established. American focus to train Filipinos in the democratic way of life, citizenship, moral character, and fundamentals of vocational education. In 1901, Philippine Normal School was founded between teachers, while in 1908, University of the Philippines was established. American focus to train Filipinos in the democratic way of life, citizenship, moral character, and fundamentals of vocational education.
Religion was not included in the curriculum of the schools. Normal, vocational, agricultural, and business schools were also open. Schools were also built in non-Catholic areas like Sulu in Mindanao and in Mountain Province. Education under colonization led to a widespread Americanization of the Philippines. Through education, American had influenced many Filipinos in terms of what they like, eat, culture, and demand on westernized products and lifestyle. Religion was not included in the curriculum of the schools. Normal, vocational, agricultural, and business schools were also open. Schools were also built in non-Catholic areas like Sulu in Mindanao and in Mountain Province. Education under colonization led to widespread Americanization of the Philippines. Through education, America had influenced many Filipinos in terms of what they like, eat, culture, and demand on westernized products and lifestyle.
Most schools were damaged during World War II and to be closed down in June 1942. The schools were opened by the Japanese. Their educational policies, as detailed in Military Order No. 2, mandated the teaching of Tagalog, Philippine history, and characterized education to Filipino students, with emphasis on love for work and dignity of labor.
Education came to a near complete standstill during the years of the Japanese occupation from 1942 to 1945. The war interrupted schooling for most, as schools were destroyed and seized for military use. The Japanese military administration required all the students to speak Japanese and to take instruction in the Japanese language. They had hoped that all people would acquire Japanese spirit and an undying loyalty to the emperor.
Prior to the Japanese invasion of Singapore, there were already concerns of impending war. In preparation of the growing military threat, schools and students prepared themselves for the war to come. In school, students were taught how to recognize bombs and how to administer first aid. Schools were later used as air raid shelters and hospitals. Prior to the Japanese invasion of Singapore, there were already concerns of impending war. In preparation of the growing military threat, schools and students prepared themselves for the war to come. In school, students were taught how to recognize bombs and how to administer first aid. Schools were later used as air raid shelters and hospitals.
To enforce the learning of the Japanese language, dedicated language schools like Shonan Nippon Gakuen were set up in 1942, taking in students of different ages and occupations. Students had to undergo a 3-month course of study, which they learned the Japanese language and were taught of the Japanese spirit and way of life. The teaching of Japanese in schools was also made compulsory in 1942. Teachers had to undergo Japanese language instructions and were banned from using the English language in schools. Teachers who struggled to learn the language or who were unwilling to learn were dismissed.
Under the Japanese regime, the teaching of Tagalog, Philippine history, and the character of education was reserved for the Filipinos. Love for work, dignity, and labor was emphasized. On February 27, 1945, the Department of Instruction was made part of the Department of Public Instructions.
Overall, the Japanese interest in the Philippines as a militaristic nation were immense. It provided many advantages to further the war effort and also supplies the raw materials needed to fuel a large-scale war.
What kind of education does Philippines had before?
By the kind of education system we have before the K-12 came in, the former system of basic education in the Philippines consists of 1 year school education, 6-year elementary education, and 4-year high school education. Pre-primary education caters to children aged 5 and child ages 6 and elementary. Elementary schools with or without pre-primary education. That's the kind of system we had before the K-12.
What are the changes do you see about the education system of our country nowadays?
Okay, nowadays, since the pandemic came in, the kind of education we have is hard when the pandemic came in. So we have to stop the face-to-face school in every place. It's not only in the Philippines but in the whole world. There is a big change in the kind of education we have when the pandemic gets into our lives. Most people, almost all the people in the Philippines stay inside the house, especially the students. So there is big changes in our education system. We have to adjust everything, and
Where do you think the students can learn more? In face-to-face classes or through online classes?
okay, since that we have no choice but to do the modular activities during the pandemic, we have to adjust everything. The children or the students must focus on modules. But when we differentiate the two, the face-to-face and the modular activities, of course, all of us is after of the face-to-face classes. Because the face-to-face classes, of course, the children, the student, and the teacher communication is really need in educational system. There should be a conversation between the teacher and the student. So that is more better than the modular activities, because in the modular activities, the child should just read the activities without the assistance of the teacher, but only the mother or the parents inside the house, inside the home. Not unlike when you are in the classroom with the teacher can teach the student or on how what to do, all the activities that's in the book. The student can ask more information, more inquiries from the teacher. And the teacher could explain better. Okay, by the way, I am teacher. I am Summers. I am teaching Nepal in Philippines of Academy here in Pawa, Quezon. I am also teaching here for 13 years. And then I am also teaching elementary school and the junior high.
What kind of education does Philippines had before?
Okay, thank you for that. Well, for me, the Spanish colonial has a big impact and influence to the system of education nowadays. Because the Spanish colonial distribute or contribute, which is the grade level, most especially the elementary level, giving them the right to education, which is giving them the right to come to school, study, and according to them, that children is the hope of our motherland. So that nowadays, it is really essential for us na in early child must have an education. And that is, I believe that in today, the Philippines have an education because of the Spanish colony.
What are the changes do you see about the education system of our country nowadays?
The changes of education of our country are first the K-12 program, which is giving opportunity to all students when it comes to their skills, ability, and learning styles. We have vocational, we have about technology, we have about academic content, which is it is necessary for us, it is necessary for those students have their own way of studying and have and also this program, this capital program has a big help to the students to show their what they have and to show their talents.
Where do you think the students can learn more? In face-to-face classes or through online classes?
Okay, as a current private teacher, I believe, according to my experience, and for me, I'd rather to choose face-to-face. Why? Because when it comes to communication and interaction between students and teachers, it is necessary. Because in one question, you must have a lot of answers. Imagine a question without answers or a question without feedback of answers. But so for me, face-to-face really necessary despite the pandemic because we have to sacrifice for it and we have to always think about the health protocol standard and then most especially face-to-face really helps students to have interaction when it comes to their learning styles because we cannot deny the fact that online class maybe it is possible for us to study, to learn, to acquire knowledge. Because yes, people would say, a lot of students would say that they learn through online because there's a lot of resources. But for me, as a private teacher, we have to give importance about the interaction between teachers and students because it builds or it makes the learning possible and meaningful. So hi, I am GM Dr. Mohamedano Monaldo and I am currently teaching at Immaculate Conception Academy Incorporated as a senior high school teacher. And I'm holding a Filipino subject which is my major is Filipino.